Good morning, home builders. It is day 6 in our new Bible study, Time Out for Parents. Hopefully you have one of these books by now. They look like this, and it's kind of backwards because of the video probably. But if you don't, please get one from Brother Keith and follow along with us. But today is day 6. If you just got yours, please start at day 6 so that you're with us. If you miss a day, whatever. Let's just stay together on the days, and there's 90 of them. Anyway, on day 6, Paul is writing to Timothy in 2 Timothy chapter 1, 3 through 5. He's kind of introducing this letter, and he's saying that he thanks God and without ceasing has been remembering Timothy in his prayers. And he has a particular memory that he relates to Timothy, and it is related to the unfeigned faith that is in thee, which dwelt first in thy grandmother Lois and thy mother Eunice, and I am persuaded that in thee also. Now, what does this have to do with parenting? The principle for today, when we skip to the end of the devotion that Paul Chappell writes, is God uses imperfect parents. There is no other kind for him to work with. And isn't that true? None of us are perfect. We know that. Paul writes in Romans, there is none righteous, no, not one. And that applies to our parenting as well. I think that anyone who has been a parent for any amount of time and is honest with themselves and would think that there are plenty of shortcomings that each of us have. It can be a sad thing, but we are often reminded of our shortcomings almost right after they happen. If you've ever seen a movie or experienced this yourself, I know I have, where you're tired, you're stressed out, your kid does something that is typical of a kid, and the response is a little overboard, a little over dramatic, and not a response that we would have if we sat and we thought about it and we prayed about it and we acted, with a clear conscience. And it's almost like, we look at our hands like, what have I done? It's a really humbling and difficult experience. I mean, for me, this message is personal. There are times where, I am reminded by the Holy Spirit immediately that I am far from a perfect parent. And what we have to realize is that that doesn't mean that God can't use us. That doesn't mean that all is lost. It means that we're exactly who God made us to be. We're imperfect people who need to rely on God. And that's kind of the resulting conclusion from that circumstance. In Timothy's case, Paul specifically goes out of his way to remember the faith of his mother and his grandmother. Not his father, not his grandfather. Those are notably absent. And what that tells us is that Timothy grew up in not a perfect home. Timothy didn't grow up in the classic American 2-person home with a dog and a cat and a picket fence and all that. But God used Timothy in a great way. And we need to remember that God can use us in a great way in raising our children. And finally, we need to remember that God can use our children in a great way. We need to remember that when our children are being children. And we need to remember that all isn't lost. We need to remember that God can use these imperfect circumstances and imperfect environments that we find ourselves in for His glory. We're all different. We're all created differently. We're all created in different circumstances. It doesn't mean that something is not fair. It may not even mean that we're necessarily even disadvantaged. What it means is that God has created us differently and placed us in different circumstances for a reason. When a child who grows up in a circumstance that we see as disadvantaged, what we fail to see is that what can God use that child for in the future for his glory by virtue of the fact that he came out of those circumstances. How effective was Timothy at reaching those who had lived a really, really tough life in the days of the Roman Empire? We can only imagine. And maybe it had to do with the environment he grew up in. Maybe it had to do with the circumstances that he grew up in. Well, we really don't know. We don't know that many details about it, but just imagine how God could use a man like that when he came from different circumstances as someone else. There's probably no way that Paul could communicate and speak to people the way that Timothy could, with certain people or people that were under certain circumstances, because Timothy had that experience. And what we see here is that even when we fail, even when we're not perfect, and even when our home situation is not what we wanted to have, we shouldn't get discouraged. We shouldn't get down about it. And we shouldn't sell ourselves short. And we certainly shouldn't sell our children short or their potential, because God allowed it to happen for a reason, or God made it to happen for a reason. And we need to make sure that we don't get in the way. Get in the way with our actions, get in the way with our negative opinions of ourselves, our negative opinions of our circumstances. And we just need to get out of the way and let God work sometimes. This is a big lesson for me. I need to not stress out when things don't go exactly the way that they're supposed to go. I need to not stress out when, a day looking back, it just didn't go well. I didn't do well. I need to remember that all isn't lost. And we can let God work, and he can work through that. At this point, I don't think there's much else to say without rambling if I haven't already been doing that. But this one hit home hard. It's personal. And I hope that you'll meditate on this. And I hope that we'll all pray individually and collectively that we would get out of the way and let God work. Let the Holy Spirit work through less than ideal circumstances. Because let's face it, do any of us really have ideal circumstances? We may sometimes think that we do in arrogance. We may erroneously think that someone else does based upon their history of social media posts. But we all know that that's not truth. So keep this in mind, everybody. This is a big one, and we'll see you tomorrow morning. Have a good day.